How's it going, folks? Stu here. It's finally time for one of the more anticipated films of the year for a lot of folks. It's another new Marvel film, and this time they've roped in the help of one of the most sort of acclaimed critical darlings in the indie filmmaking scene over the past few years. So without further ado, let's have a little chat, and honestly I can't quite believe I'm saying this, about Neil Breen's Eternals. What's that? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is Neil. They brought in acclaimed indie director to help spice up the MCU. I'm here now. Fateful Findings. I think I know what I'm talking about. They got Neil in. Look. IMDb. Eternals. Huh? Directed by... Oh, fuck. Yeah, I'll have to park my dreams for another day. It's not Neil. It's Chloe Zháo. It's her new film. They got her in the MCU. You remember Chloe Zháo was doing Nomadland and then getting a lot of awards for it. And off the back of that, Disney have recruited her to inject some new life into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So colour me excited and maybe just more interested to see what might come of this collaboration. And I've got to say, Eternals is kind of a big fucking mess. So this one is a very big film in scope, like a lot of previous Marvel films, and it's basically about a group of people that are sent to Earth to protect it from aliens called the Deviants, and then shit goes a bit tits up on their old mission there. If on paper that sounds like it's quite a generic or cliche synopsis, I suppose, for a superhero film at this point, kind of is. On paper, it definitely is. But what Eternals is riding on, and what Marvel and Disney are really hoping you take away from this film as an audience, is Zhao's vision. The injection of a more intimate and human touch to a lot of these things that we've seen done elsewhere in superhero films before. And in that sense, it makes for a really, really strange film, precisely because of the way it's constantly clashing Marvel Cinematic Universe machine and Zhao, amazing intimate indie director. I don't think overall the film as a whole is good enough to overcome a lot of the problems that arise from that clash. And it kind of falls into that trap of having so much going on in such a big film that you sort of end up glazing over and it just becomes a little bit boring, a little bit dull, which is an incredibly frustrating thing to feel while watching a film like this, not least because I'm such a big fan of Zhao's previous work. All of the stuff that Zhao brings to this film differently, that makes it different to a lot of Marvel stuff we've seen before, is welcome. It's the stuff I do want to see more of in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but in execution it doesn't really work. And those things that I like in theory are absolutely the things that I expected to be liking about this film, and that is the way that it's presented. I mean, the look of this film, it's undeniably the best looking Marvel Cinematic Universe film up until this point, I think. But more so than just pretty landscapes and lovely sunset shots, I really like the approach to just shooting the intimacy and shooting the interactions between characters here. The entire thing is shot very close up with wide lenses, which gives this almost kind of, it feels cliche and reductive at this point to say it, but like Malik feel, like this very Malikian feel to the look of this thing. But a result of that, as well as that, it definitely feels like maybe the most sort of intimate and human of the Marvel films to a certain extent, which is no surprise because it's Zhao and we know that she can do that really, really well. It's what we've come to love from her as a director. And Eternals for me works best when it is allowed to have those moments between characters where they're not really saying anything or doing anything, they're just sort of together, and that they're intimate and they're sort of letting their guards down, and we get a lot more emotion, I think. And a further result of that is that I think Zhao gets some really great performances out of characters. I will say I'm not sure I was the biggest fan of everyone, but I do have some standouts. I really, really like Barry Keoghan as Druig, I think he was called in the film. Absolutely every time he popped up on screen, it was just immediately, yep, on board with you, love what you're doing. I loved Brian Tyree Henry. I thought everything he was doing on screen was great, and he's probably the most likable in the film. I attached and connected with his character much more than any of the other Eternals on screen. I also really like Lauren Ridloff as Makari, who is a deaf member of the group, but is deaf in real life. I thought that was a brilliant casting choice there, and she is just incredibly watchable, incredibly likable. I loved her relationship as well in the film with Druig. And also Gemma Chan, I guess, is kind of the lead of the film, even though it is an ensemble film, really. I thought she did a good job. Nothing amazing, but, you know, she was a good character to follow as an audience through the film, so she was enjoyable. But everyone else, I don't know. It's not like they're giving terrible performances. Maybe it's much more on the characters they're being given front, but my God, I mean, just I didn't really give a shit about any of them. Perhaps the biggest casualty of that for me, and the most painful one for me, is Kumail Nanjiani. I love the guy. I think he's amazing. And everything he does, whenever he pops up, I tend to be like, you're amazing. I'm enjoying this. But here, it just didn't really work a lot for me. Obviously, he's a big source of comedy in the film. And the comedy lines he's given don't really ever tend to work for him. I didn't really feel myself laughing at all in this film. But also, his character just felt somewhat inconsequential. And I'll be honest, a bit of a dick. I don't know how they fucked that one up. But Kit Harington's in the film as well. Kind of. And I was like, well, that's Kit Harington. Richard Madden, I'm going to be completely honest here, fucking sucked. I don't know what happened, but nothing he did worked. And Angelina Jolie is, for all intents and purposes, just there. Just fucking there. You've got a film about a large ensemble of superpowered people that we want to follow, and honestly, half of them just didn't give a flying fuck about. And I think a lot of people that maybe feel similarly towards that will come out of that and go, oh, it's a result of trying to fit too many characters into one film, or not giving these characters enough time or enough build up in other films before you go and do a film like this. And I don't really think it is that. I think that's a weirdly reductive way to look at this issue. A good writer could make it work. Like, I don't know what else to say there. It's just badly written. Badly written characters in this film is the problem, not the fact that we haven't been given enough time with them before. And on that note, it's really the writing of this thing that I think stuck out the most for me as my biggest problem, and the thing that really got in the way of me connecting with it where I really wanted to connect with it. Because as I said, you've got all of these really great and almost new perspectives in the cinematic universe, but at every point that starts to work remotely, the screenplay of this thing is just a constant reminder that this is just a Marvel film that doesn't really give a shit about that and just wants to get to A, either smashy big time with big CGI things, or B, connecting to the rest of the Marvel films. It's constantly taking remotely interesting and engaging moments and thoughts and just explaining it to us in the most frustrating ways possible. The screenplay of this thing, it's like, imagine watching Nomadland, right? But every minute, Frances McDormand says to another character, like, hey, just a reminder, like, I'm just a free soul that doesn't need an actual home and finds home in her community and has a real great attachment with the world and with humans and the land. You'd be like, hey, yeah, I know, we fucking got that already, my guy. We knew that. Frances McDormand fucking standing up after squatting down, shitting in her van on camera for us. Takes a moment to swing her window open and shout across at the caravan opposite, hey, I just took a shit in a bucket. People don't usually do that and would look down on activities like that. But ultimately, this is my situation and I'm not letting it bring me down because I don't look for the things that other people look for in life. And also, this is a comment on the gig economy and the things that regular everyday people at the bottom of the ladder have to put themselves through. It would be incredibly annoying, to put it lightly. Welcome to Eternals, where that is it for 2.5 hours. And I know at this point it's probably somewhat naive to expect much more than that from a Marvel film. And I want to be clear that I've enjoyed a lot of Marvel films before that have probably similarly been as on the nose, as overt in their screenplay as this. But when it's doing so much to try and deliver that in a more kind of grounded, I don't want to use the word, but like filmy way, of course it's going to feel more jarring. Of course it's going to make me go, oh, this is a weird clash of visions. But also another casualty of that for me at least was the tone of this thing. There's this really strange feeling throughout this entire film. And I'm not sure I can 100% put my finger on it. Just something's missing. But I think what's going on there is that we've got someone like Zhao, a fantastic filmmaker that really thrives in those sort of quieter, more human moments, the intimacy of character relations. So when we get dramatic moments, dramatic beats where characters are going through something emotional together, it's perfectly fine for her camera to sort of linger on them and for us to get that sort of quiet moment between them. But when the Marvel formula and the superhero genre demands the stuff that we need to get, quotation marks, from a superhero film, those sort of witty remarks and banter between the group, you know, them getting along, them not getting along. When you approach that with the same sort of sentimentality as you do those more dramatic character moments, it feels weird, right? And it makes sense because that's Zhao's way of filmmaking. That's how she puts her characters together. That's how she delivers her stories. And I think that's why I say a lot of this film feels dull and boring. It's not that I'm bored by the heady stuff in there, the concepts and the themes, because I'm not bored by those. And I'll say it, I think it brings up some interesting themes and concepts. What makes it dull is that all of the moments outside of the more intimate beats, which are in there but are sparse, are approached with the same tone and atmosphere as the slower bits. And so it just feels like you're watching people do shit, and there's a real lack of connection with those characters. My overall sentiment with the film is that on paper, I really like what Zhao's trying to do here, and I really like the things it's going for. But in execution, I just don't think those things are given the correct space that they're needed to really pull them off. For all the talk of this being a new direction and a new feel for Marvel films, I really don't think at the end of the day, overall, it is that. I mean, the pieces are there, but it is ultimately just reluctant to ever go with those things and constantly comes back to just feeling like a fucking dumb superhero film. I think people's enjoyments of this thing are gonna lie down to one thing primarily, and that is where you lie on that spectrum of the fact things are being done and the way things are being done. So for instance, the fact that this film is trying to tell its story in a different way for the MCU, the fact that it is a much more diverse film, the fact that it is doing things which we haven't really seen from the MCU before in a very specific sense is absolutely a part of the film. But then the way that those things are done is a slightly different part of the film. There are definitely going to be people that are just happy with the fact that it is doing certain things, and that's absolutely fine. All the power to you if you watch this film and you got that from it. But as I said, for me, the fact that things are done in this film is never really fully justified by the way that those things are done, and that just makes for an incredibly messy and frustrating watch that I really wanted to love a lot more, but I just could not get on board with. But what about you guys? Have you caught Eternals yet? I've no doubt you probably have. It's a new Marvel film. Everyone's going to be seeing this thing. Very interested to see what you guys thought about this film, because I have spoken to a lot of people that have very differing opinions on this thing. So let me know your thoughts on the film in the comments down below and we'll have a little chat. But of course, as usual, if you enjoyed this video and you want to see me talk about more shit, go ahead and click subscribe. It means you don't miss any future reviews as they drop on the channel. And you better believe we got more coming. I will see you guys soon for some more thoughts on more films. But until next time, what do we got to do to get Neil Breen in the MCU, right? Because, you know, I think, finger on the pulse, a lot of people want it to happen. Feige.